And I think I've invested in things that I've seen those people fail in the past. And sounds bad, but it sort of gives you a bit of a realization of, I think you need to go down that track, because to be very lucky to get things right every time, I almost think it's non-existent.
So, I think there's two things I'd say about it. One is, in America, the culture is really different. People accept failure sort of failure's a badge of honor, whereas, here it's sort of viewed as poor. And I think it's wrong. Failure is a really good thing. And I think I learned a lot out of Contigo, some really valuable lessons, but I learned a lot more out of Boodle. And other than for what I learned, from an investor's perspective, Boodle was a failure, right? Yeah. We raised over $10 million and we had to liquidate the company. Now, that fills me with pain. I reckon it took me 2.5 years to get over that, because I care so deeply about, getting it right. But it was a really complex problem. And, so I learned far more out of that than I did out of the one that succeeded. And I reckon as a result of the two of them, I have a much more resolved view on how to pursue these ideas.
Because Boodle's good, let's talk about it. Because naturally, when you're going to do an idea, it's friends and family first. And this obviously, I think everyone does it, right? And so there are a few friends involved with Boodle, and you're seeing that journey take place where you get to a stage or hang on, this idea is not quite working. We need to change tact. And I know what you originally showed me in, maybe it was Caboodle.
Yep.
To then what I saw in Boodle, they were different things.
Completely.
And every one of your ideas has come just on the cusp of the technology changing or catching. Is that fair?
Yeah, we probably change, pivot, in the startup world, they call it pivot or persevere. You're pivoting all the time, trying to find a fit. But, it's a really interesting journey, right? You raise money from people because they're the ones that trust you to do the right thing with it. You do your best to go and find out how it works. And I still remember, we raised money from friends and family, and we used that to go and then resolve a pitch to go and get money from professional investors.
Yeah.
We thought we're the smartest people in the world when we got $2.8 million from James Packer and the head of UBS. I was like, oh my God, we're the smartest people on the planet. Yes. And I was like, we was just so far off. When I look back at that and I look at me then, I'm oh God, I'm cringe at the lack of awareness about what was going on. But we were giving it our best shot. And I think I have this very sort of strong principle now. When you ask somebody to back you on something risky, it doesn't have to be if you're doing something risky and you're asking someone for support, the only thing you can promise them is that you'll leave nothing on the field of endeavor in the pursuit of that outcome. Right? I can't promise I'll give you a return on your investment or what we're doing works. But you can promise you'll give it everything in the best way possible to make it work. And I think that's the principle of early stage That's the principle in early stage investing, is that you can only promise that. So I think, my learning on Boodle is I think we did that well. We promised that and we executed as hard as we could and we kept going until the point where we decided it was no longer appropriate to take small sums of money. Yeah. The only way to launch that business was a very big check. And when it became clear we couldn't get that very big check, the only decision that you could make as a board was to liquidate the business. So
can you talk us through that when you started to see the writing on the wall? I don't know if that's a fucking nice way to say it. But,
no, it's a sensible.
But when did you actually start to think, hang on, because I'm assuming there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of I've been building this for however many years.
Yeah, there's a lot of time. Yeah. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of sense of self tied up in what you're doing. So it's your identity is attached to it.
Yeah, and other people's money.
So I think it becomes harder and harder. There's a term they use for it. It's the commitment curse or the commitment paradox. You're escalating commitment paradox, right? The more I commit, more effort I put into it, the harder it is to make the right decision because you're so deeply committed. But I think, having an external board, sensible, pragmatic investors on the board, you're always sort of checking yourself going, are we drinking the Kool-Aid and believing in what we're seeing, or are we looking at the numbers for what they really are and making a pragmatic decision? Yep. So, we decided as a board that we needed to raise at least $10 million, but preferably a pathway to $50 million to be able to drive this business. And I remember I was at a conference with a VC called Joe Schoendorf, who was one of the founders of Accel. And I was explaining Boodle to him at this conference. I think it was 2016. He's like, look, George, that's really smart, really good thesis. But
He's American, I'm guessing?
Yeah, but okay. I do a bad American accent.
I was just picking up.
Is it wrong to do an American accent? Am I allowed to do an American accent?
No, of course. Young George. Look, George. Yeah, sorry.
But he said to me, he's like, you're going against the trend. Makes perfect sense. It's logical, but you're going against the trend. If you go against the trend, the only way to go against the trend is you need lots of capital. So it's like from an investor's thesis, go against the trend. Where's all your capital coming from? So we set the target of trying to find $50 million in capital, and we found some investors in the Middle East who committed 10, but also wanted to go further with us. So we thought, got a term sheet done. We thought we'd done the deal. One of my investors flew in, we drank champagne, shook hands. I'm like, yep, mate, we've got the money we need. We got runway. We can go against the trend. And so we thought it was done, and literally that deal just disappeared. Like I flew back to Australia, right team, we're good. We're going to start. In my head, we're starting to gear up. And then it became very clear that this just wasn't going to happen. And I couldn't understand it because in Australia, sign a term sheet, that means it's going to happen.
Or shake hands.
Yeah. So, that was a really, once we understood that deal wasn't going to happen and we couldn't get another one to replace it, there was money on the table, like small amounts, not large amounts. And we viewed that it was not ethical to take a small amount of money because that would not solve the problem. So it was at that point that we were like, it was hard, right? Because we'd been growing revenue, growing users, like the traction was actually looking reasonably positive.